Hey there spirits, and welcome back to the graveyard. My name's Soul, and this is my ghost friend Art. Hello! In this video, I'm going to show you my process in making this huge dog portrait that I did. Let's jump into it. A boo-boo's gonna do what we can do. So there's a joke in the artist community about telling people you're an artist, and the first thing they usually respond with is, can you draw me, or can you draw my pet? Which, one, why would I want to draw your other? And two, I don't know what made you think I could draw pets when you look at my drawings of anime, pixel art, and video game characters, but okay, go off. And another thing,
I'll give you $200 to paint my dog.
Sold to the wealthy individual over there with the most precious little baby. Who's a good dog? Who's a good dog? Aren't you just the cutest? I'm taking you home with me. Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
But that's my dog.
Well, you're mine now, isn't that right? Isn't that right?
Hurry!
Give it to me.
I mean, it's a joke because it happens so often, but in all seriousness, I'm willing to take any commissions that come my way if I think I can do them well. Anyways, this story happens a little differently than that. A couple years ago, I painted a portrait of my roommate's cat for her birthday. His name was Sir Thomas Aquinas, and he was a tuxedo cat. So I decided to paint this small portrait of him in his historical clothing and a monocle, like a little noble gentleman. Well, I guess my roommate hangs that painting at her work office, and one of her coworkers would see it every day and say that she loves it and wants one of her own. She finally asked who made it and wanted to commission a huge, and I mean biggest painting that I've ever painted huge, portrait of her dog, Daphne. She slid into my DMs the next day and commissioned me for my biggest and most expensive commission I've ever done. After trading some texts back and forth, I acquired that her dog is named after Daphne Bridgerton, who is a character on Netflix's hit show Bridgerton, which is set back in the Regency era of England. The character Daphne is known to wear several beautiful dresses throughout the series, so we picked out a dress that I would paint her dog in, and I was sent on my way. Now, at this point in time, I hadn't painted traditionally in a hot minute. I had been focusing on my digital work for the past couple of years, and I will say that my skills digitally were up to par with what she wanted, but physical art is a completely different beast to work with. So I knew it would be a challenge going into it. And on top of that, I've never done a piece to that scale, which ended up being an 18 by 24 inch canvas. It had been so long since I painted with acrylics that my paints were a little clumpy, so I had to get all new paint supplies. I also wanted to make sure the painting turned out as good as I could make it, so I picked up a couple things I've never worked with before, like gesso and satin varnish. So the first thing I did was make some mock-ups in Procreate on my iPad to get the proportions and composition correct. Once I was happy with that, I converted the picture to line work and printed it out. I printed the design with tiles so it would be the exact size of my canvas, and all I had to do was tape all those tiles together. I picked up this carbon transfer paper from the art store, which basically, if you put pressure on a certain spot, it will transfer the carbon to whatever surface you're trying to transfer it to. So I just laid the printed design on top of the carbon paper and then laid that on top of the canvas. And then I just traced it with the blue pen so I could see what I traced versus not traced. Look how cool the carbon paper is after I trace the lines. And you can reuse this carbon paper again on the spots that aren't traced on. Score! I can now add another thing to my never-ending collection of art supplies that I'm hoarding that I may never use again. With the design transferred onto the canvas, all that was left to do was basically fill it in like a paint-by-color painting. Once the base colors were down, I then went back in and did shadows and detailing. This project was actually really fun for me to do and get back into painting after not painting for a little while. I will say that my digital art skills did kind of transfer over to painting in real life. The only thing is that the paint actually takes time to dry, and once the paint is dry, it's really hard to blend it with the color that you lay on top of it. So those are the things I kind of struggled with at the beginning, and then as I painted, it got a lot better. Now, I had to buy a couple different types of brushes for this project because anyone that knows Bob Ross or has even seen a Bob Ross painting style, he has a bunch of different types of brushes for different techniques and textures that he's trying to create. So it was really fun using those similar techniques like with a fan brush or a big fluffy brush to achieve the textures I was going for. I was also hoarding these metallic water-based paints in my art supplies for I don't know how many years, and I finally was able to use them for this project. Now, one thing I will definitely keep in mind the next time I use them is when I cover the final painting with the varnish, because they were water-based paints, the varnish, which is very liquidy, ended up smudging out the metallic paints when I painted on that top layer or sealant. Next time, I would think that a spray varnish is probably better than a painted one for covering those specific paints. Or maybe a combination of both, doing a liquid varnish over the acrylics and then using the spray paint on top of the details on top of the painted varnish. In the end, it ended up looking really nice, but I did have to go back in and correct those details with the paint again later. I think overall it took me around 16 hours to paint, and I even streamed my longest 6-hour stream painting it on Twitch. And even though she only commissioned a painting for me, as the overachiever that I am, I decided why stop at having just the painting be an old style portrait of a noble person. Let's go all the way and get a very, very old picture frame to frame this piece in to make it look like it belongs on the wall of a bunch of other noble portrait paintings. So we traveled around to a couple different thrift stores without much luck, because the canvas size was a very unconventional dimension, I guess, and it was really hard to find a picture frame in the same size, until we got to a very specific thrift shop. Now, this thrift shop that we found actually goes out to different estate sales, buys out the entire estate, and brings all the stuff back to the shop. So this place is completely full to the brim with a bunch of vintage old treasures lining these huge back-to-back shelves. Machines, clothes, and furniture of basically all different types and sizes that you could possibly think of were there. They had some machines that I have never even seen before or know what they do. I saw some of the weirdest stuff there, like this Kermit hat, which I regret not buying, and I hope when I go back it's still there, but who knows, that thing was a gem and it was a missed opportunity not to grab it. Anyways, we hit the jackpot and they had an entire length of shelves full of picture frames. And let me tell you, the amount of cursed paintings and creepy family portraits we saw in those frames was endless. They had really old frames, but the only issue is that they were stacked on top of each other like this. So to pull a frame out, you basically had to spread apart the frames and pull it out, hoping that some of these frames with glass on them wouldn't break. Let's just say it was very nerve-wracking. And one thing that would suck is that you could only see one side of the frame. Now, we brought a measuring tape and we would measure the side of the picture frame that we could see and be like, okay, this is the right size. But the thing is, you couldn't tell how long it was because it was pressed in between all these other frames. So the only way we were able to figure out if it was the right size is we would have to pull out each picture frame and check the size of the side. Sometimes the frames would be too short or they would be super, super long. And then we would have to try and squeeze them back into the space we took it out from. And if anyone has ever tried to do that with a pile of books or anything of the sort, you would know that it's completely impossible to try and shove something back in there once everything shifted into the space that you took it out of. So we got really good at taking the frames part way out, measuring it that way, and then if it wasn't the right size, pushing it back in. After checking that entire shelf with no luck, we were a little devastated because if this place didn't have a frame, who would? But they had a bottom section to the store, and looking down at it from the top, it just looked like furniture. So we were a little hesitant to go down there. I'm so glad we checked there because there was a whole other section of picture frames and we found the perfect frame there. The size was perfect and the vintage look was like one of those old Victorian paintings. And lucky for us, it had a very cursed painting in it. This cursed horse. Now, I don't know what the story is behind this horse because if you look at it, I mean, the person who painted it, obviously animals were not their forte, and it almost looks as if someone very young or inexperienced painted the horse. But then if you look very closely at the mountains in the very top corner, it's in a completely different painting style, and it looks like someone else might have done it. I don't know which came first, the horse or the mountain, but it looks like two different painters painted on the same canvas. Now, we didn't get rid of it because it was too funny to throw away, but part of me wants to go in and add my own little section to it, like another artist adding onto the canvas. We were actually telling my friend with the cat painting about it, and her boyfriend got really, really excited and said that he wanted the cursed painting. So I'm going to gift it to them. He's like super into like the occult and like weird, strange, cursed items. And let's just say that my friend doesn't seem to share the enthusiasm to hang it up on their wall at home. And then of course, just having a vintage frame wasn't enough for me again. So we decided to make our own custom nameplate that we would nail onto the frame with the name of the dog engraved on it. So the first thing we did is we had to take this straight metal plaque that we got from a hardware store, and I wanted to add some fancy curved edges onto it. So we took some cutters, sanded it, and dremeled it to make it the shape that we wanted it to be. Now, we have never done metal engraving before, and to be honest, the first time that I ever saw it was like a couple days ago when the craftsman did something similar. And I'll link that video up in the top right corner where he explains that process in much more detail and tells you how it actually works. We figured that we could do something like this with that same liquid, so we got out our Cricut, made a stencil, and engraved the name The Lady Daphne Virginia Phil onto the nameplate. Now the liquid takes several coats every 5 minutes over a 30-minute time period, and to neutralize the acid, you have to pour baking soda over it to properly clean the area. Once we peeled off the stencil, the engraved part wasn't as clear as we wanted it, so we did a layer of black paint wash on it and wiped it off so it would stick to all the crevices. Once we had the nameplate, it was just a matter of hammering it to the frame, adding the portrait, and the whole painting was done. You know what time it is. It's time for the sexy B-roll. Oh god, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll never do that again. Now, her reaction was priceless when I gave it to her. She basically laughed for an entire 2 minutes straight after seeing it for the first time. She didn't say anything, she just laughed. And I got really nervous that maybe she didn't like it, but it just turns out that she loved it so much and that she was basically speechless. And she loved the frame and all the extra little details we added to it. She actually ended up tipping me an extra $50 because of all the extra work I put into it, which... tip your artist if you actually enjoy the work that they did for you. Thank you. But as you can see, it turned out really well and actually better than even I expected, which is funny because I'm the one who made it. But it was a really fun experience and I learned a lot from painting something this big. Now, after I posted pictures of it on my social media, it looks like a lot of my friends and people who have seen it are looking to get commissions of their own pets in the same style. So I guess this is my origin story of how I became a pet portrait painter by painting pets as noble persons. Just kidding. Well, not yet at least. And recently I heard a rumor that the same girl who asked me to paint Daphne is looking to get another commission of her other dog that she has. So maybe this is part 1 of a 2-part series of me painting pet portraits? Oh my god, what has my life become? But if you enjoyed this project, please give it a thumbs up and comment down below any pet portrait painting commissions that you've done, or maybe what you want your pet dressed up as if you were to get a pet portrait. And as always, if you like my content, please subscribe and share it with your friends. And if there's any art pieces you would like me to see, please tag me on my social media. And until next time, see ya!